It's a painful, solemn homecoming.
Let's get to the other story here. Israel-Palestine. One area where Biden has, of course, demonstrated competency in the most incompetent way possible. Competency if you believe that his goal overall is to wipe out Gaza, which I do believe that's his overarching goal. Whatever fucking Israel says goes. Okay? Gazans are returning to the devastation in Han Yunis as Israeli forces are withdrawing. Now, you might think, wow, that's good. That's progress, right? Well, the suspicion is that the Israeli forces are only withdrawing from Han Yunis so they can turn around and mount a siege on Rafah for a potential invasion of Rafah. However, yesterday was the lowest death toll, as far as I understand, in Gaza since October 7. Only 32 Palestinians were ruthlessly and mercilessly slaughtered in Gaza. Only 32. This is progress. That's how bad the situation is, that we say only 32 people were murdered yesterday. Israel is also, even though they had no control over the Gaza Strip, according to many Zionists and many defenders of Israel, although they had no control over Gaza whatsoever, that Gaza was not an open-air prison, Israel somehow has found some control over Gaza, it seems, northern Gaza specifically, where now they are allowing more aid to reach northern Gaza. They're allowing the bakeries to be open in northern Gaza. They're allowing water into northern Gaza. It's very odd that a country that does not have control over this territory that it occupies is able to allow these things to happen in a territory that it doesn't certainly occupy. 400 trucks entered today, record since October 7. Interesting.
Palestinians who fled the city of Han Yunis return to its ruins after Israeli forces pull out. Some pick through the debris of their shattered lives, looking for whatever can still be salvaged. Around £15 billion worth of damage has been inflicted to Gaza's infrastructure, according to the World Bank. How to measure the suffering of its inhabitants?
No words can describe my pain. I have no words to express my feelings. Our memories, our dreams, our childhood, and our family are all gone. I couldn't find anything under the rubble.
The conflict is far from over, but 6 months after the war began, following Hamas's October the 7th attacks, Israel has withdrawn the vast bulk of its ground forces in Gaza. Han Yunis in southern Gaza was the scene of Israel's last major ground offensive. Troop numbers had already been drawn down. Now only one brigade is left, guarding a corridor splitting the territory in two. Though the possibility of an Israeli assault on Rafah, where so many Gazans fled seeking safety, remains a possibility, despite international opposition to it.
Israel will maintain the freedom to act, as it does actually in the West Bank, to act for its own security, based on intelligence, in raids, in short-term raids that do not entail remaining on the ground for long periods of time. Now, there's, of course, the question of Rafah. And in my mind, the question of Rafah has to do more with sealing off the border between the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Desert, so Hamas cannot reinforce itself through there as it did before October 7th, much more than with the remaining 4 battalions of Hamas. Those battalions can be contained, they can be dismantled over time.
Last month, the Israeli army launched a huge raid on the Al-Shifa hospital complex in northern Gaza, despite previously having declared the area free from Hamas. The move was widely criticized abroad, but Israel is holding it up as a model of how it plans to act in the future. Inside Israel, frustration with the government's handling of the war is rising. At a huge rally in Jerusalem last night, in solidarity with the hostages held in Gaza, the relatives of some accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of not doing enough. They're placing their hopes on talks around a ceasefire deal in Egypt. But this evening, a Hamas official said the group had rejected the latest proposals put forward. In a video today, Netanyahu claimed securing the hostages' release was the primary objective of the war, and following criticism from right-wing allies, also said a date for an invasion of Rafah has been set in order to, in his words, secure victory over Hamas. Hamas has been severely weakened, but it's already been re-emerging in the north. Israel's reduced much of Gaza to rubble, but has no clear plan on what comes next. For ordinary families back in what's left of their homes in Khan Yunis, who've already lost so much, a bleak future of further violence and instability lies ahead.
Well, I'm joined now by Sam Rhodes, Director of Planning at UNRWA, the UN agency for Palestinians that provides the backbone of humanitarian support in Gaza, and he was in Gaza until 10 days ago. I mean, when you look at a place like Khan Yunis, what can any aid agency do there? I mean, it's rubble.
It's complete rubble, and the Israelis pulled out today after an operation going on for 5 or 6 weeks. We've continued to provide some services in part of Khan Yunis, the parts of Khan Yunis that have been accessible towards the coast, but this idea that life will go back there to normal, that we can operate as normal, is not realistic. But
what do people do when they move into these areas? I mean, do they live in tents, or, I mean, because they can't live...
People, the Israelis pulled out overnight, and some people go back, as we would in these situations, to inspect what's left of your home. So a lot of people, we would expect to see movement from Rafah as people go back to have a look at what's left. But there's very little. If what's left of Khan Yunis is similar to what's left of northern Gaza and Gaza City, there'll be very little for people to go back to for months, if not years. What is
UNRWA doing now? Because, you know, the Israelis have been systematically attacking your organisation, undermining it, saying you're biased. You know, are you functioning as an organisation?
We are functioning as an organisation in many ways, not as we would normally function outside of a war, but we are distributing flour to tens of thousands of people every day. Since October, we've provided flour to 1.8 million people in Gaza, almost 1.9 million people. So we're providing medical consultations to over 20,000 people a day, refugees and non-refugees. In times of conflict, in times of crisis, UNRWA's mandate actually extends beyond serving and assisting Palestine refugees to support the population at large, because we are the entity with the footprint, with the capacity, with the understanding of conditions on the ground.
And what about getting aid around,
Not flowers, man. Flour, like for food. Flour. To make bread. Jesus. Chat really needs to fucking clean out their ears, I think. Anyway. Thank you for your coverage of Israel. I live in Israel, and your coverage has been a huge help in seeing through the collective mindfog here. It's fucking nuts here. I feel like I'm losing my mind every day. I live in the settlements. I hate it here. I wish I could move. Weren't your ears clogged as fuck? It was. It was. And I unclogged it. Problem requires solution. Okay? Just like top of the hour ad break requires the solution of subscribing. This video claimed what Netanyahu said was the primary object is returning hostages. It left out that he said the primary objectives are returning the hostages and destroying Hamas. I don't want it to seem like he's making a softening of rhetoric, when in reality he's been blocking lots of attempts to compromise in the negotiations under pressure from Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Bezalel Smotrich. Yeah. Sent you a message on Instagram about maybe having a board member of the PCRF on your show. Let me know. That seems good. Will Stancil still being a spineless little liar about Israel? What? What is this? Once again, Netanyahu follows orders from American presidents. Israel is a subsidiary of the United States. We end this war with a stroke of a pen is the core conspiracy theory driving the left bonkers, since the corollary is Biden must want this all to happen. Now, Will Stancil in and of himself is a fucking weirdo loser who gives a shit what he thinks. But this was the common sentiment from liberals in November, and it still kind of is to this day. The notion that Israel is a separate entity, the notion that Israel can do whatever the fuck it wants, and America can just simply sit back and not do anything was really stupid back then, and it's really stupid now. Now, of course, did Will Stancil recognize that he was wrong about that take? No, he still says it's still correct. Of course, this would require you to, close your ears and close your eyes and refuse to reckon with the reality that, the United States of America does have pressure power, and Biden hasn't been using that pressure power until recently. And even now, the pressure power that Biden is using is still very marginal. Okay? Very, very, very marginal. It's weaponized ignorance. Okay? Here's the other side of this coin. The Biden administration is now effectively preparing to make aid to Israel contingent on ... unspecified changes to Israeli policy, which means that Israel can do little or nothing to appease the White House. Hamas is now in control of the Biden administration. Tel Aviv does what DC wants them to do, or Tel Aviv does what DC allows them to do. It's both what they want them to do, but also what they allow them to do. Okay? Just so you understand. You forgot to run the ads? I thought I did run them. Oh, you're right. I did forget. Thank you, chatter. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. I'm going to tag IDF again. I'm going to say, Bill Vog, thank you for the 5 tier 1 gifted subs, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour, by the way. Once again, it seems like, with this affectation, I'm basing a character off of you for a script. Okay. You're probably banned from visiting Israel now. Oh no, what will I do? Oh man, what will I fucking do now? The Israeli chatters that keep saying come to Israel are going to be so disappointed. Yeah. America says jump. Israel says how high. Okay. This has been proven over and over again. Even if even if those inside of Israel refuse to reckon with that reality, those in positions of power do reckon with that. Yoav Gallant famously even allowed any aid to go inside, even with restrictions that they obviously very quickly implemented. When asked, why are we allowing any aid into this terror territory, Yoav Gallant said, well, America asked us. What are we supposed to do? Say no? Palestinians are starting to realize that Western leftists see them primarily as expendable shock troops in a war that Western leftists warmonger for, but never actually go fight in. Non-stop sirens going off in Israel. Fuck your ceasefire. Flatten Tel Aviv. What? I'm sorry, but who the fuck are you to say fuck your ceasefire? You're not even a Palestinian. Your life is not at risk. Your family isn't starving. I love the genre of tweets of like, I love the genre of tweets as though like Noah Smith is on the side of Palestinians at all. Like he found one fucking random person with a real aggro perspective. He saw someone else from, I assume, potentially Palestinian descent or Palestinian themselves or living in the West Bank or whatever, saying, understandably, what do you mean fuck your ceasefire? That's a ridiculous fucking position to have, the fuck your ceasefire position, I mean. Okay. And he went, yeah, this is what the leftists believe. They're fucking warmongers. Yes, dude, you're right. The neoliberal that champions U.S. foreign policy unconditionally, including with respect to Israel's offensive genocidal campaign, is not the warmonger. It's that one random fucking overzealous Twitter supporter. Come on, dog. Expendable shock troops in a war that Western leftists warmonger for, but will never actually go fight in. Yeah, my favorite genre of tweet. Arguments with a figment of the tweeter's imagination. Yeah. Strikes me as odd have been launched since mid-October. Thinks the broader Western left is against this position. Perhaps does he simply think the Biden admin for continuing Are you okay? Wait, why? Do I seem not okay? Context here is, though, talks in Cairo just started, and after the withdrawal, there's a lot of posturing from both sides. Netanyahu is posturing about a Rafah invasion as a point of pressure in negotiations, so it doesn't seem like the move is Hamas is getting free shit. Hamas, on the other hand, is posturing that it's not impressed and is taking its time. Internally, both Ben Gvir and sponsors threaten to kill the government if the war ends without a Rafah invasion. It's insane. You seem upset? Yeah, I'm covering a genocide. It's kind of upsetting. Anyway. Here's the Rafah invasion plans that Netanyahu claims he has, but the State Department does not know when it will happen or how it will happen.
Prime Minister just said, like, in the last hour or so that a date for the Rafah invasion has been set. Have the Israelis shared that date with the U.S.?
To my knowledge, we have not been briefed on that date.
And given the Prime Minister just said, like, in the
first and around.
The issue, the situation of getting aid into Gaza remains incredibly difficult.
Because the Israelis won't let you do it, basically.
The Israelis won't
By the way, to answer what that chatter was saying, or to, I guess, complement it a little bit with additional information, the demands made by the Palestinian envoys has been pretty clear-cut since the last ceasefire, which is the release of hostages in tiers and a full-blown permanent ceasefire executed over the course of the upcoming 6 months, which was like a couple months ago, so that date keeps changing. Okay? Netanyahu's government, on the other hand, has said no to those very reasonable demands. The step-by-step plan that Hamas had implemented for a temporary ceasefire that turns into a permanent ceasefire is pretty fucking reasonable. It got very little coverage outside of this channel. It got very little coverage in mainstream media, but that has been their position almost in perpetuity. Netanyahu, on the other hand, does not want to engage in a permanent ceasefire. He wants the hostages back, and he wants to continue pummeling Gaza, which is a wild thing to openly admit you want to do. Like, I feel like even lying about it would be better in this situation, to be like, yeah, we will do a permanent ceasefire, and then not actually do it, which goes back to what the chatter was saying, which is because he has a lot of internal pressure from the Israeli public and also specifically from his war cabinet to make promises that he will not end the war. It also corresponds to his interest of not losing power because he doesn't want the legal scrutiny that will inevitably come, considering that he has been under investigation for quite some time over charges of corruption, and those all of those cases were halted when he got back into power with this incredibly right-wing coalition. So it is just as bad as you think it is. This is one of those very few instances where there is legitimately a open and shut, black and white, good guy, bad guy situation. One party is the good guy here, and one party is the bad guy here, as it usually happens with genocide.
It's not that they won't let us bring aid in, but the process for bringing aid in is convoluted, it's time-consuming, it's extremely difficult to bring aid in through the one crossing point that was designed for goods that is still opening. Once we've got aid into Gaza, there's the issues of distributing it around Gaza Strip. There are issues of availability of trucks, conditions of law and order on the ground, and our inability as UNRWA to distribute food to northern Gaza, which we've been calling for, which the international community has been calling for several months, and all the more so since the reports on famine came out a few weeks ago.
Well, I mean, what's happening with, the crossing's supposed to be open now, isn't it? So why isn't...
Crossings are open. The crossing, Kerem Shalom crossing in southern Gaza is open. It's not open to the extent that is required to get in the 500 trucks a day that aid organizations, including UNRWA, say are required.
But they said Erez was open then, didn't they? So, I mean, is it functioning?
No, Erez is not functioning. We've seen the news plans to reopen Erez. Erez was also a passenger material, so a terminal. So the idea that Erez could substitute for the volumes of aid that needs to get in. And it's not just aid that needs to get in. You can't survive. You can survive, but you can't live and you can't recover on a food parcel that UNRWA provides. We need the commercial crossings to open as well, and the passage of commercial trucks to be allowed back into Gaza at the volume.
I mean, the thing is, Israel wants
Why do we think Netanyahu genuinely wants the hostages back? No, he doesn't want the hostages back. If you think that Benjamin Netanyahu legitimately, honest to God, wants the hostages back, you might be, and I'm not saying this chatter is, but like anyone who tries to tell you that Netanyahu legitimately cares about the hostages or the safety and security of Israeli civilians since October 7, okay, is the dumbest goof of all time. Netanyahu does not give a fuck. Bro, Israelis don't think Netanyahu cares about the hostages. Why do you think there have been massive protests in the streets? Like, people who love the pummeling campaign of Gaza, the bombing campaign of Gaza, do not love that, like, their family members are still trapped in Gaza. Even the fucking family members and their friends are criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu's actions. Like, they're like, dude, get the hostages out and then continue the fucking war. What are you doing? Like, people who genuinely do not care about Palestinian lives at all, who openly say, like, Benjamin Netanyahu is the bad, he's not a good person to do this offensive campaign, are angry at him because he's killing too many fucking hostages. As I understand it, what was discussed today was a twofold 6-week ceasefire without follow-up, which I won't go into because Hamas, of course, won't take it. The second was a broader framework for a 3-step path to a permanent ceasefire. The U.S. reportedly taking a more active role, trying to lock in an agreement on civilians return to north with keys for exchange. This is because Israelis are scared they'll lose leverage on exchange if civilians return early. Oh, yeah, lol, is showing. Likud polls at 19 mandates, lol. It's pathetic. Yeah. He is completely cooked. He's cooked. But polls show Israelis prefer the genocide of the hostages. No. You're missing the forest for the trees there. Israelis want the genocide to continue, but there is enough Israelis now that want to free the hostages before the genocide continues. The overwhelming majority of Israelis want it to continue. Okay? That is a given. With no care or consideration for the civilians, that's like 80% plus of Israeli Jews, at least, that have been polled, that believe that this bombing campaign has to continue. Okay? And you know, the protests right now that you see in Israel are not about the genocide. The protests that you see right now in Israel are about the bombing campaigns that are killing hostages, Israeli hostages.
A future without UNRWA at all? I mean, it says it doesn't trust you. Is that possible?
I think right now, given the gravity, given the complexity, given the scale of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, you can't, this is not an organization that you can turn off. UNRWA is a lifeline to hundreds of thousands and millions of people inside Gaza. You can't replace that with anything else overnight. It's you starve UNRWA and you do starve Gaza in many ways.
And so what is the immediate need right now?
The immediate need in Gaza is for the bombing to stop, for a ceasefire to hold, for the release, unconditional release of hostages, and for the crossings to open to allow UNRWA and other aid organizations to get aid to the people that need it. We need the crossings to open in a sustained manner. We need to be able to operate in a safe way. The tragic case of the World Central Kitchen workers who were killed last week are yet more aid workers, Palestinian who've been killed since the start of the conflict, almost 200, the vast majority of whom are UNRWA workers, many killed in the line of duty whilst discharging their humanitarian functions.
Sam Rose, thank you very much.
News poll 12. Half a year into the war, the state camp is weakening. The Likud and, yes, Atid are getting stronger. According to the survey, Gantz's state camp wins 32 mandates and Likud 19. More in the survey. Who performs better in a war cabinet and who's primarily responsible for the crisis with the U.S.? According to the survey, only 14% are sure that the Israeli government is doing everything to return the kidnapped. Holy shit. They do not. I mean, it's understandable that they don't personally think that Israel's doing everything they can to return the hostages. That makes sense. 14%. Those 14% are like the hogs, by the way, of Israel. Those are the guys who are the bibists. Half a year since the outbreak of the war, and a News 12 survey that we published last night in the main edition suggested the state camp led by Benny Gantz would be the largest party in the Knesset with 32 seats if the elections were held today. Wait, hold on. I think, 1 second. Chatters, 1 second. fuck? What just happened? Sorry.
And we turn now to John Kirby. He is the coordinator for strategic communications for the White House National Security Council. Welcome back.
Thanks, Margaret.
So Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel's one step away from victory, but they still plan to go into Rafah. Has Netanyahu agreed to President Biden's request to make this targeted and not a ground assault?
We have been very clear with the Prime Minister and his team that we don't support a ground operation in Rafah, that there are other ways, other options that they need to look at for how they're going to go after the Hamas threat that still is in Rafah. We had a virtual meeting last week. We expect to have an in-person meeting with Israeli counterparts in the next week or so. We're still narrowing down the schedule, where we hope to be able to present in more detail our thinking, some of our alternatives, the kinds of things that we want them to learn from our own experiences about how to do operations of this regard.
So, as you heard, the IDF says this is an evolution of the war to draw down some of these troops. Exactly what are they preparing for? Is this for another front in this conflict?
Well, I certainly wouldn't speak to IDF operations or their planning one way or another. It's a sovereign military. The indications that we've been getting from them this morning is this is really largely rest and refit for troops that have been on the ground consecutively now for 4 months, and they need a chance to come out. Now, what they'll do with those troops after a rest and refit, I can't speak to. All I can do is say what I said before. We don't support a major ground operation in Rafah. That has not changed, and we're looking forward to having conversations with the Israelis about alternatives to those kinds of operations.
You know, there has been a large amount of criticism and skepticism as to how Israel is waging this war in the wake of the deaths of those 7 humanitarians this past week.
Yes.
You said on Tuesday the U.S. has not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international law. How far-reaching is the U.S. investigation of Israel?
I wouldn't call it a U.S. investigation of Israel. We have a normal process the State Department runs and governs, where they take a look at incidents, particularly those that are operations being conducted by partner countries, and they look at them and they assess them against international law. And they're doing that in real time, Margaret. So some of them they've looked at and concluded, some they're still looking at.
So they may be in violation of international law.
Thus far, as I said the other day, we've not seen any indication that they have violated international humanitarian law. But we take this seriously. They take it seriously at the State Department, and we'll keep looking at this.
Well, the Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders rejected Israel's explanation of what happened in that World Central Kitchen attack.
Yeah.
Because he lost staff in Gaza, as have other humanitarians, more than 200 dead to date. Take a listen.
We do not accept it because what has happened to World Central Kitchen and MSF's convoys and shelters is part of the same pattern of deliberate attacks on humanitarians, health workers, journalists, UN personnel, schools and homes. This is not just about implementing an effective deconfliction mechanism. Our movements and locations are shared, coordinated and identified already. This is about impunity, a total disregard for the laws of war, and now it must become about accountability.
This isn't a mistake, he says. This is a deliberate pattern, and he is not the only aid organization to say so.
We certainly
Will there be
understand.
accountability?
We understand the frustration that they have. We share that frustration, and there have been too many aid workers killed by Israeli operations, and that is why the president was so firm with Prime Minister Netanyahu in their call this week about they've got to change the way they're doing this. And the deconfliction process does matter, because there is already communication between aid workers and the IDF.
It's pointless. It's not working. It's clearly failing.
Clearly, this broke down. No question about it. We're not arguing that it hasn't. Our case to the Israelis is you got to do more. You got to do it better. It's got to improve. It's because we've already seen some aid organizations now pulling.
We got to do better, man. We just got to. I don't know how, but we'll do it. There will be accountability, but it won't come from the West. I mean, there will not be accountability. Poll context, Gazan had a high 40 projected seats a few months ago, and as his joining of the Union cabinet was seen as a showcase of national unity. Ever since, his party co-leader Zahar split from the party because he wanted to leave the cabinet since his new party is below the threshold, and in conjunction with calls for him to leave the government, he's he's slowly been following. There are also massive changes on the far right and far left.
Back, not just World Central Kitchen, but others. This is a time when the people of Gaza need food, water, medicine, fuel more than any.
But the president's own national security memorandum stipulates, as you know, that there can't be an impediment to delivery of aid. So is negligence, gross negligence, failure to communicate, failure to follow through to protect these aid workers a violation? Is there any accountability?
Certainly those things are not acceptable. And again, that was the tenor and the tone of the conversation that the president had with the prime minister. They have taken some measures of accountability here in the immediate wake of the World Central Kitchen.
Two soldiers.
Two were fired. We're going to be looking to see, well, first of all, we're going through the investigation ourselves right now. We want to reserve judgment until we've had a chance to look at their findings. And we certainly expect, and this is an important point, that the announcements the Israelis have made, while welcome and important, can't be the end of it. We've got to see sustained changes in the way they're operating on the ground and the way they are allowing humanitarian assistance to get in unmolested.
And as you know, the Israeli government says that had nothing to do with the president's calls. They had already planned to take some of these measures.
The president specifically asked for the measures that we saw them announce that later that evening and then the coming day.
Oh, God.
We'll see if they follow.
Oh, God, it's so fucking cooked. It's so extra cooked that, like, they're saying that the president doesn't even have a hand in this. It's just kind of happening on its own. That's crazy. That certainly makes things worse.
Follow through. The former defense secretary, who you know well, Leon Panetta, said on CNN, in the past, in my experience, the Israelis usually fire and then ask questions. Is the Biden administration position still that there should be zero conditions on aid, military aid to Israel?
I'm not going to get ahead of the president or decisions he might or might not make going forward. He was very clear in his call with the prime minister that if we don't see some changes in their policies in Gaza and the way they're prosecuting operations, we're going to have to make some changes of our own.
You do think these are Israeli policies then to block aid?
They get to decide how they prosecute this war. It's their operation. We just talked about them pulling troops out and what that means. They get to decide how they prosecute operations. We get to decide how we're going to react to that and how we're going to administer our own policy with respect to Gaza. We make those decisions. And the president was clear with the prime minister. If there's not changes, if things don't get better, then we're going to have to make changes of our own.
So the president is considering withholding, conditioning, doing anything here? Because for 6 months now, we have been hearing complaints like this. Humanitarians on this program telling us what's happening.
Look, again, we see it ourselves. We're not blind to the risks that the aid workers are in, certainly not blind to the suffering that the people of Gaza are going through. And the president, again, was clear. I won't get ahead of him, Margaret. I won't prejudge decisions he will or won't make.
Heard from him on this. If he feels so strongly, why isn't the president out there talking about this?
You saw his statement after
I
the
read a
prime
paper
minister's call with the prime minister, and he will continue to talk to the American people and the members of Congress about what we're doing and what we're not doing.
It is of direct national security concern, is it not, that as the director of national intelligence says, there is a generational impact from what is happening on the ground there.
No question.
That there could be an impact on terror recruitment
No question.
long term here.
No question. I mean,
so what is the U.S. policy other than wait and see?
It's not wait and see. I have to take issue with that. That is not the policy at all. Two things can be true at once. You can still be a friend of Israel and make sure that they have what they need to defend themselves. And they do need things. I mean, we're talking about the war in Gaza, rightly so. Completely understand that. But they're under threat. They live in a tough neighborhood. They're under threat from Iran and Iran-backed groups all around. They still have a need to defend themselves. How they do that matters.
Yeah.
How they conduct these operations matters. And that's what we're talking to them about. And we need to see some changes in the how, or we'll have to make some changes in our support.
Is there a timeline for when they need to act by? Because
we're looking right now. I mean, again, they made some announcements in the few hours after the call. They made some other announcements the next day about opening up crossings. All that's welcome, but we're going to be watching this very, very closely. It has to be sustained and it has to be verifiable.
John Kirby, thank you very much.
One of the more uniquely evil individuals in this administration or in any administration is this fucking guy. I think that the fact that it is a relatively tough, like somewhat tough interview is kind of shocking. I guess like it spells that there's definitely an attitude change from mainstream media. Like the situation demands that there is infinitely tougher questions being asked, but I guess like if I pull myself out of like the immediate, it is it shows that the attitude from the state, or at least like the mainstream media, is changing as well. It's unheard of or unimaginable to consider someone like Nancy Pelosi, for example, demanding that America condition weapons shipments to Israel. And that's precisely what happened this past week. So I think that many, many more people are coming to that same conclusion that we in this community were at already, that like Israel's actions are unsustainable. It is actually hurting Israel. It is actually hurting America's interest in the region because they've gone above and beyond. Hurting Israel? Yes, it is. America wants Israel to continue. America wants Israel to continue being this apartheid state, or whichever, like whatever, a destabilizing, a successful destabilizing force in the region. The problem is Israel is making it virtually impossible for there not to be a broader conflict. One that, opens up new fronts of war. Because they've gone so above and beyond, doing such unimaginable cruelty to this massive population that it occupies the territories of, that it's getting to a point where it is virtually impossible to avoid. It's just not, and a broader conflict doesn't suit their interests. It's like the Trump equation with capital owners, right? There will always be people who can make money from a crisis. Except too much instability is not good for capital owners. So Donald Trump is only as good. Donald Trump is good when he is deregulating and doing some crisis, but too much crisis is going to make it harder for capital owners to make money off of. Israel is behaving like Donald Trump. A little bit of crisis is fine. A little bit of destabilization is fine. It is permissible, especially when it plays into America's broader agenda in the region. Too much of it, and all of a sudden you have a broader conflict. When you get to a broader conflict, well, then that makes it all the more harder to make money off of. Especially if Israel doesn't exist. Hold on. Fuck. Okay. Nice. 14.8 ounces of chicken. Straight white chicken breast.
Today marks 6 months of war in Gaza, 6 months since the horror of October 7th and the deadly terror attack on Israel that killed more than 1,200 Israelis, with more than 100 hostages still believed to be held by Hamas. It's also been 6 months of Israel's devastating response, causing widespread...
Yeah, this is another thing that I think is very interesting. I noticed this in mainstream media. The coverage shifted quite dramatically, where like for the longest time it was just like October 7. They only mentioned October 7. And it was atrocities in October 7 for months and months and months, rarely ever talking about the atrocities occurring in Gaza. It does seem like that has shifted. It does seem as though mainstream media still, of course, frequently mentions October 7 regularly. And yet they do factor in what Israel is doing in direct quotes in a way that they never had before.
Spread destruction across Gaza and taking the lives of more than 33,000 Palestinians, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, and leaving the territory on what the UN has called the brink of famine. But it was the loss of 7 aid workers this week that seemed to galvanize a new level of outrage. These 7 individuals from around the world, including one dual American-Canadian citizen, working with the relief group World Central Kitchen, killed by repeated drone strikes of their clearly marked convoy, despite the group having coordinated their location and movements with the IDF. World Central Kitchen was founded by renowned chef turned philanthropist Jose Andres, his organization providing meals around the globe in the most dire circumstances, from the aftermath of natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes to war zones from Ukraine to Gaza, where World Central Kitchen has served millions of meals to Palestinians. That work now paused after the attack that Israel admits was a grave mistake. So I sat down with Chef Jose Andres to discuss his emotional response to the death of his colleagues and what he believes both the Israeli and U.S. government should be doing to address this war's deadly toll. At what point did it sink in for you, the enormity of this loss?
Well, has not sunk in yet. I'm still going through the process. But there's a lot of work to be done. We are a small organization, and right now we are in the middle of this.
Bro, so the people saying like the people that went in there are sketch, they're allegedly former MI5, MI6 contractors or whatever. No, dude, they're former fucking veterans. In a lot of instances, former veterans provide security for philanthropic organizations in conflict areas. Like, that's just that is normal. I mean, I don't know if these guys have also done work or whatever, but like, I don't know why people are so focused on the fact that they might be, they might have worked in like espionage of some sort. But veterans volunteer for aid organizations to provide security all the time. And a lot of veterans themselves also do personally just volunteer in general. Like, they become aid workers. So it is unsurprising that there were some people there that were veterans.
That we wish we were not part of. We are an organization that we want to go to difficult places and bring food to people and bring joy to people. Because people, when it's about food and water, they need you today. So for me, I think the grief is going on, especially the members I knew closely. So I spent a lot of time with her in missions. She was always a joy and was a very beloved member of the community. She's like a sister. Damien, who was a newest member, and so this hits home because that's people I serve next to, and they're the example of who we are, and that they putting themselves in harm's way to try to bring hope and smiles to others.
You wrote a very emotional tweet this week about Zomi, saying, "I wish I never founded your organization. You would be alive somewhere today, smiling and making somebody somewhere feel like they were the most beloved person in the world." You said you wish you'd never founded World Central Kitchen.
You know, I will forever have to live with this, as well as the families and all the members of World Central Kitchen. I founded it with one very simple idea: can we provide food and water quicker than anybody else? Obviously, something like this makes you think. We did what we did because it's a lot of people that are always forgotten, people that are always voiceless. I know very often it's many people that joined the organization because they saw me doing the work before. And this began being an organization of one that became an organization of millions. And these are 7 internationals, 6 internationals plus Saif, the Palestinian, who is buried, and I received the photo from his father, his family, on where he is already resting. And this has become news because it's 6 internationals that they've been impacted by this war, and where they're dead now, many are mourning. This comes with a risk, and we try to minimize the risk. Who was going to tell me the day we were kind of celebrating that we had armored vehicles? Finally, armored vehicles that were very well marked, that we were doing the right protocols, that we were engaging with the IDF in the way we all should be doing. Like every minute, everybody knew where everybody was. Who was going to...
This isn't an argument to say like Russia good or whatever, but when he was operating in Ukraine, his organization, when it was operating in Ukraine, they were attacked. Or rather, the area that they were operating in was bombed, but not deliberately. So as far as like this being a unique phenomena, before Ukraine, I don't think that the World Central Kitchen had actually worked in conflict zones before. They were just more so working with natural disasters. And they recognized that, holy shit, like, you know, we are putting, we could technically be harmed in conflict zones in a way that is different than natural disasters. Never directly and deliberately in this way, though. Like, I don't think he ever would have perceived that. I don't think he ever would have like he did not perceive that like Israel would legitimately fucking strike their cars.
to tell me that these protocols will break in such a way?
The initial report released Friday calling the drone strikes a grave mistake that should not have happened. Satisfied with that report?
Well, I want to thank, obviously, the IDF for doing such a quick investigation. But at the same time, I would say something so complicated, the investigation should be much more deeper. And I would say that the perpetrator cannot be investigating himself. But I would say we need more information. We need to see better quality videos. We need to be saying what was the conversations, the radio conversations between the different officers and soldiers in charge of saying that those cars were a target because they were an imminent threat. Those weapons can only be used with very sophisticated drones. And we all know that those drones have high capabilities, day and night, with cameras that can see in very powerful way what's going on.
That's one of the things that they said, is that they could not, because it was night, see the logo from World Central Kitchen, which was so clear on top of the vehicle in the daytime. They said they couldn't see it at night. Do you buy that?
Obviously, I would like to see high quality of the video, high quality of the images. I'm very sure that probably those logos were visible. They were white cars That logo is very colorful. Even in a dark night, I guarantee you that those drones could be seen.
They say that their drone video, and this has not been verified, this video, that they say shows Hamas operatives, and they thought one fired from an aid truck.
Every time something happens, we cannot just be bringing Hamas into the question. I think IDF knows better than anybody that can be a better army. Should be protocols, should be rules of engagement, that somebody has to be making sure that they happen in a war zone. Is way too many cases now of humanitarians dying. Many civilians, women, children, that the only thing they did was trying to get close by to somewhere that they were giving them flour or bread. This is not anymore about the 7 men and women of World Central Kitchen that perished on this unfortunate event. This is happening way for too long. It's been 6 months of targeting anything that seems moves. This doesn't seem a war against terror. This doesn't seem anymore a war about defending Israel. This really, at this point, seems it's a war against humanity itself. That's why, yes, I'm requesting Israel, I'm requesting Prime Minister, I'm requesting IDF, that this investigation and many others should be done right, should be done in an independent way. So not only for World Central Kitchen family, for the families of the deceased, but for every other NGO that has been targeted or has lost members, to exactly understand how the IDF has been operating, so IDF can learn from it. We can all learn from it.
Jose, you said earlier this week in an interview, we were targeted deliberately, nonstop, until everybody was dead in this convoy. Do you believe at this point, from what you have seen, that they were deliberately targeted? Your aid group?
That the convoy was deliberately attacked is obvious. The precision, the continuous following over 1.8 kilometers until the 3 cars were totally destroyed, and all the members inside those 3. Obviously, this was targeted. We could argue that the first one, let's say, was a mistake. The second, the third.
Do you believe World Central Kitchen was targeted on purpose?
My humanity tells me that obviously I don't want to believe that World Central Kitchen was targeted. And probably this was not the case. Because offshore they knew our movements, offshore they knew our teams, offshore they were in direct contact.
Yeah, certainly.
With the different people that coordinate in these situations. But obviously this keeps happening. This breaking of communications keeps happening. Civilians must be protected. Humanitarian organizations must be protected. There are people that have names and last names. There are people that matter. They cannot be voiceless. They cannot be ghosts of wars that don't make sense. Obviously, IDF has a lot of questions to ask themselves. What exactly are they there for? Are they there really to bring home safely all those hostages that still are suffering? Offshore, Israel had the right to defend itself. Offshore, what happened on October 7th to Israel is something should never happen. That was an atrocity.
Jose, we heard Benjamin Netanyahu first say before the investigation, it was a mistake. It happens in war.
If we simplify things in such a way as Prime Minister Netanyahu has done, we are losing all the basis of what humanity should be there for. If somebody knows suffering, that's the people of Israel. If somebody really understands the meaning of suffering, if somebody should be holding the highest standards of humanity, I would say that's also the people of Israel.
Netanyahu says they will do everything they can to make sure nothing like this happens again. Do you believe him?
It's a first step, but we know that leaders of the world and politicians, they give speeches that they never follow. These declarations of intentions needs to go alongside with real change of the people with boots on the ground.
You spoke to President Biden. Did you say to him what you're saying to me now?
I spoke as a person. I spoke as the founder of the organization. I spoke on behalf of the 7 people who are no longer with us. I spoke about the hundreds of other humanitarians that they are no longer with us. And I spoke about the thousands of civilians that probably they didn't have to be perishing in the way they are. You say, President Biden, you can, and America will stand behind you, support the right of Israel to defend themselves on this massive attack. But at the same time, I will say that President Biden also can be defending and supporting the right of Palestinians not to die just trying to be getting a piece of bread. I think both truths can live in the same place. You can be a friend of Israel, and at the same time, you can be telling your partner in the Middle East, you cannot be conducting war in such a way. You cannot be destroying every building, every hospital, every school, every university. You cannot be destroying just the future for decades of more than 2 million Palestinians. And in the process, leaving them hungry, leaving them without water, or what is even worse, you shooting them in the middle of the street in the process of trying to have access to food.
So, what the White House did this week, it seemed like a very significant shift, saying there would be consequences if they didn't allow essentially more humanitarian aid and take more care with civilian lives. Were you satisfied with that statement?
I think there will be consequences is part of the problem. Should be already consequences. Support Israel's right to defend itself, but you cannot be used given weapons that they are killing American citizens who are humanitarians. You can be supported.
This is really good to hear, bro. It is really good to hear from someone like him because, dude, even someone like him who wants to defend Israel, like really fucking bad, like very obviously wants to defend Israel and has defended Israel really fucking bad since October 7, is coming to the recognition that like you can't fucking blow up hospitals, you can't blow up universities. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, people that will never listen to me that think I'm a fucking terrorist, Islamist fundamentalist will absolutely listen to Jose Andres. Okay? This is a guy who has direct access to Biden, direct access to Obama, direct access to Netanyahu. And they lost him. Here's a guy who is still saying, like, Israel has a right to defend itself. But what the fuck are you doing? So you need to understand, like, from the framework of a lot of normies, they don't see what Israel is doing as a continuation of its apartheid state. They see this as, like, somewhat of an aberration. It's different. It's somehow different. And it is different because it's like the same kind of severity, but ramped up dramatically. But it's good to see the normie perspective shift on this issue. Okay? Obviously, it's the situation is war crime after war crime. And it's it's unconscionable. It's fucking disgusting that tens of thousands of kids murdered in carpet bombing and none of these scumbags spoke up. He needed his friends to die before he would buck the propaganda machine. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I'll take any fucking allegiance I can get in this situation. Like, I recognize that. I understand that. I mean, dude, aid workers, as far as aid workers goes, Israel killed 200 aid workers. Before everybody was like, whoa, what the fuck's going on here? Let's calm down now, Israel. What are you doing? 200! Israel killed 200 aid workers since October 7, chat. But this is really, really important for two reasons. One, to understand the broader liberal position on the matter, because we do live in a country where, no, people aren't fucking rugged anti-Zionists. And two, it's important to understand that this is a turning point for liberals in general. Bro, what's the purpose of your stream? You don't eat, say anything for half an hour, watch your phone, gets unlocked on purpose to get the crowd going. I wonder where did the money go to your head? Mr. West Hollywood, just explain. Yeah, you got me. I apologize for not pausing and like dunking on Jose Andres as he's like crying and talking about how emotional his experience has been. Well, the real point of the stream is to serve you a 3-minute ad break at the top of the fucking hour. That is the real point. You ain't hungry no more like you were when you was young, right? I can't tell if he's just trying to fucking bait or if he's just like being a dickhead. You gonna pause for 3 hours? This fucking guy can't bro, he can't even get his fucking dumbass opinion straight. On 4-7, he's mad I'm pausing too much. Now he's mad I'm not pausing enough. Half of the stream you eat or watch on your phone, like girls sending you news while people donate money they can't afford. That's pathetic. Wait, what do you mean girls are sending me fucking nudes and I'm looking at news that girls are sending me? While people donate the money they can't afford, that's pathetic. Okay, Mr. Big Shot, maybe humble yourself. Your ego is sky high. I like that, once again, the mind of a fucking dumbass conservative is always phenomenal. He's just like, dude, I've imagined that like girls are sending you nudes and it's making me angry. Anyway, my point is what? ... It doesn't matter. The point is at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free, baby. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. You were so up your own ass that you think people here don't matter. It's so crazy that you think 21,521 people in the chat right now are all fucking idiots. Like you're the only smart one who figured it out. That like the 21,000 people in here are just like so fucking stupid. They're just like captive, enslaved by the enchanting mouth sounds that I make on the 1 hour time frame that I do eat food. You know what I mean? Like only you know the truth. None of them actually fucking don't get it. They don't get it. They're just captured here. No, this is not an ad bait, bro. This person is like legitimately just a mentally unhinged person. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, these guys don't understand. They're so stupid. They have no way of dealing with anything. They just like are in here captured by you, spending their last dollars on you. You know what I mean? Yeah, following for 4 days, you used to be like this. Well, that guy, we already know who this person is. This is a person who's been banned from the chat. So he made a sock account and then followed on the same day. April 4th account creation, following since April 4th. He just got banned for being a smarmy little dipshit. And now he is continuing that exact same energy on his new account, which will also be banned as well. He was so stupid that we, at least in the chat, thought, I guess maybe with a little bit of charitability, that he's just baiting so that he can hit a 3-minute ad break debate at the top of the hour. Look, see, last time you cried that 13K viewers were not enough, huh? I don't dislike you, but you got it in your head. I think I'm, what? But it got your head. I think I'm not jealous. What are you saying, bro? This is also a false narrative. Me being upset wasn't about having 13,000 viewers. Me being upset was about the fact that this community doesn't enjoy things beyond politics, beyond immediate politics. I do recommend you take your medication, though, chatter. This is a D-fan loser? Yeah, probably. That we are normie repellent, as I said. That when we do stuff that's not immediately political, people have this like weird reaction to it. You need to figure out what you're hating on. Anyway. Hopefully you get better, though. It's a waste of time. You don't like politics? Well, interact with your viewers instead of ignoring them like you, the Messiah. Okay, dude. I'm going to ban you right now. How does Hasan just ignore me? What is he, my therapist? Good one, Miskiff. This guy literally is upset that out of 23,000 people in here, he's like, well, he is also not even being ignored. He doesn't get enough. He doesn't get enough attention from daddy.
Israel right to defend himself, but at the same time, you can be asking Israel to conduct themselves at the highest possible human level.
They opened 2 more crossings, the Israelis
Especially
announced.
in a community
Is that
that-
enough?
Obviously, it's a first step to open new entry points into Gaza, but at the same time, to make sure that they're open and hundreds of trucks can go through each one of them. This will be a first step, but at the same time, how we do it that is safe. Let's the humanitarian aid flow. Let's make sure that IDF has a real reckoning on how they conduct war. Who are the enemy? Who really are they fighting?
Jose, not only have you suffered this tragedy and the loss of your employees, you care so much about getting humanitarian aid in there, about getting food in there, and you can't do it right now. So how and when can you come back?
We need to make sure that the humanitarians doing this work are safe. Hundreds have died, close to 200 already. In a way, I'm sad that it had to be the killing of 6 foreigners that brings all this outrage. Sometimes history is written, unfortunately, in moments like this. But if it's anything that the lives of these 6 heroes, brave souls, can bring, is just the real understanding of what's really happening in Gaza. The answer of why all the destruction cannot be because it's a Hamas operative in every building. We cannot be winning a war destroying the livelihoods of 2 million people. This is not the way to create safety for Israel. This is not the way to create safety for the Middle East. This is not the way to create safety for a better tomorrow. I don't believe in higher walls. I believe in longer tables. What is good for me must be good for you.
Your CEO said this was unforgivable. Despite what happens with the investigation, despite however more is done, is this unforgivable?
It is unforgivable. I will have to live with this the rest of my life. We all will have to live with this the rest of our lives. I've seen firsthand what has been happening in Ukraine. Entire towns and cities being wiped out by Russia and by Putin. What Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing is exactly the same. The best future we can be providing for our children is when we provide for the children of the people we don't know the same future and the same hope we are trying to provide for our own. What is so difficult to understand about that?
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking.
This is good. It is good. Overall, it's a good thing that Jose Andres is out here fucking complaining.